Hello, friends, and welcome to Career Talk. I am Suran Sharma, your host and agile consultant based in Netherlands. Friends, as you may have seen in the thumbnail, today we are going to discuss some tricky situational project manager interview questions shared by our WhatsApp community members. And to help us, we have a special guest today, Karabi Bharadwaj, an associate VP and a program manager. And she has an extensive experience in managing multi-million dollar engagements for rolling out products and driving end-to-end delivery of complex programs for IBM and Microsoft. Friends, before we dive in, small request. If you find this session helpful and want to support us, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out our future episodes. All right, so let's get started. Hello, Karabi, and thank you for being with us today. Welcome.
Hi, Sunand. Hi. It's a pleasure to be here, Sunand. Thank you.
Please tell us about a little bit about yourself before we start the session.
Sure. Even before I kind of introduce myself, I would like to voice out loud that Sunand, it is my pleasure to watch Career Stock channel. That's uh, that's one thing that I would like to call out.
Thank you so
And
much.
I have been watching a series of YouTube videos which you and the other team members of your cohort they have been uploading, and it has helped me a lot in terms of refreshing my knowledge around Scrum, around Agile, and around general, project management, delivery related questions. So thanks a lot to your effort and initiative.
It's
Uh,
a big achievement for us. It's coming from you, so thank you so much.
All right. So, a little bit about myself, Sunant. I'm having over 18 plus years of experience. I started my career with pre sales of Microsoft Navision, and I worked extensively with the homegrown product companies. I'm from Calcutta, by the way, which is eastern part of India. And then I moved on with the project management, product, and people management, donning various hats across my career. I worked for IBM and Microsoft, and I'm working for an Indian product company, Blue Cocoon Digital, here at Calcutta. And here I am facing your interview.
Great. Okay, so if you allow, shall we start?
Please.
Okay. So, friends, all these questions are definitely are real question. They are asked somewhere. So, definitely, Karabi is going to help us. So, the very first is regarding the project deadlines. So, let's suppose that your project has a fixed deadlines, and but that one of your key team member is suddenly leaving, or maybe he or she resigned from before completing any important task. So, how do you adjust your project plan to ensure the on-time delivery without compromising the quality? So that's a tricky one for you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this particular question has an element wherein the schedule cannot be unchanged. The schedule remaining unchanged, we'll have to do something. The PM needs to do something so that the situation can be managed optimally. Now, usually people across various organization has different support system to help cope up with this kind of unexpected situations, right? And it again depends from the organization's process and protocols how we deal with the situation. So for me, while I have been working with the organizations, I find that whenever I'm assigned any project, it is very important for me to kind of socialize this project across the cross functional team members, specifically with the resource managers, as well as within the engineering community and the vendor managers. The more I socialize, the more it is easier for me to deal with such unexpected situation, because in this case, the moment I see that there is an impact because of the sudden exit or whatever be the reason, the first thing I will definitely do is an impact analysis, like how much of the workload is on that particular team member, and if by not having a team member for more than a couple of weeks, is it going to impact my schedule, is it going to impact the delivery for the customer or not. So upon understanding the impact, and this impact analysis I cannot do it alone, I'll have to sit with the architect, with the tech lead, and with the other team members to also understand their thought process, right? Many a times it may so happen that the other team members, they are quick enough to step into and fill that shoes, and they kind of self absorb some of the tasks. However, this cannot go on as a continuous measure, because then they will also be overloaded. So it is important for me in those situations to talk to the resource manager and quickly find a replacement. At the same time, it is also important as a PM to inform the stakeholders, both internally as well as externally, with the customer, that yes, we are having this unexpected situation, so that they are not caught surprised or off guard suddenly because there is an impediment, or there is a immediate bottleneck. So probably my answer to this question would be, first of all, please socialize about the project so that you can deal with such unexpected situation. The second thing you need to do is do an impact analysis. The third thing, understand from the team members if they are okay to share some of the responsibilities, at least temporarily. And the fourth thing, of course, you inform and involve the stakeholders at both the ends.
Great, wonderful. Thank you for that. Okay, so if you allow, shall we move on?
Yes,
Next
please.
question. Okay. So there is a scenario. Let's say you are into a project meeting, project status meeting, and you notice that one of your team member giving overly positive progress report, despite there are evidence or there are things which you know that they are not going right. Right. So how do you address this while keeping the team morale up or high? Maybe you can share some of our experience from a past, maybe about a time when you had to deal with the misaligned progress reporting. There are times when there are mistakes happen deliberately or unknowingly, people do few changes in those reports. So any experience with that?
Yes. So there are two parts to this question if we are experiencing this question in any interview. Number one is the direct question: if there are over optimistic commitment from any team member, how do we deal with that? And number two is, if there are status reports that is being shared with us which is not completely aligned, it may happen due to various reasons. So we'll deal with this two type of question one by one. Number one is, I will share my experience wherein there has been an over enthusiastic team member who was kind of going on providing the input which was not fully correct, right? And it may happen that because he was thinking very fast and then acting second, right? So we'll have to, as an experienced team member, as an experienced project manager, we'll have to understand and get into the pulse of the team member. Maybe a one-on-one meeting with that team member usually helps. However, when you asked if I want to share one of my experience, I will tell you what happened, that in one of such projects, when I was seeing that the trend was kind of continuing and it was not contained, I requested all the team members to do a peer review status report. So, one team member is going to provide the status of the other team member, and the other team member is going to take up the status report for the next team member. In this way, they are actually calling out the dependencies more clearly once they have finished the work and once they have seen what is the kind of work which has been delivered by their team members. And this process, when I continued for 2 or 3 sprints, I kind of realized that almost all the team members now, they have better clarity of the dependencies on each other, and the over enthusiastic team member was kind of contained such that he understood that now the dependencies are being called out. So that is one example which I would like to give. To your second part of the question, Sunand, where you asked, we sometimes provide not so aligned status report, I would say, and it can happen due to various reasons, because we are working in a geographically dispersed world, our cultures are different, and we are assuming a lot of things because we are not co-located anymore, right? So whenever I see a trend, it is important for me to kind of organize sync up calls quickly as possible, to contain that mindset, to contain over assuming or over assumption mindset. So that's how I usually contain such things. However, um, I would also like to call out the fact that as a PM, I am actually on top of my delivery, right? So, whenever any team member is providing any status report, I do not take it just on the face value. I understand the dependencies, the assumptions wherever they were made, if they are met or they are still unmet or not. That's one. The second thing, I verified from all the team members if the status reports are correct before I present it to the stakeholders and the steering committee members. So that's how I would like to answer this question, Sunand.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great. Let's move on. So let's assume that you are into middle of a project and you discover that initial project scope was based on inaccurate assumptions, and that leads to a significant deviation from the original plan. So how do you communicate this discovery to the stakeholders, and how are you going to pivot the project to align with your revised expectations? It
Right.
happens quite often. Yeah.
It does. It does. In fact, it has happened with me when I was assigned a project when it was already in its full swing. So I joined the project team during the middle or towards probably at the fag end of the delivery, and we knew that we needed to repivot this project. So the question here needs to be understood by the interviewee, that the interviewer is probably trying to understand what are the steps or what are the thought process which is going to help mitigate the situation. Now it depends from project to project, it depends from organization to organization. So in one such experience which I have had, I will see that if we have sufficient schedule and sufficient budget to repivot the stuff, the pending tasks, then probably yes, after talking internally to the stakeholders, we are going to do it, right? However, if there are not sufficient budget and schedule available with us, it is best to inform all the stakeholders, both externally and internally, of the challenges and the need to repivot because of assumptions which went incorrect. The problem is, whenever we are doing such repivoting in the midst or probably towards the fag end of the project, there is a lot of technical waste and technical debt, right, which is something which we are incurring. Who pays for that, right? That's where the discussion, the facilitation of the discussion to come to a amicable resolution from the service provider, the IT company, and from the customer comes into the place. And that's where the experienced PMs, not in terms of having a title, but in terms of having the sensitivity of, if they can feel the pulse of the situation, they usually prevail on the internal stakeholders to help them understand that it is probably our assumptions which went wrong. So we have to reach to a compromise so that we are not overburdening the customer. We'll have to be extremely truthful internally and externally. Once the leadership understands that yes, it is an issue which has happened from our end, then either, it depends again on the schedule and the budget, I reiterate, we usually use the risk reserve, or probably we ask for additional budget as a part of the enterprise fund commitment, and we do the repivot, and then we go on. And the customer also understands that we are completely honest and transparent, we have accepted our mistake, and that's where it is a opportunity for us to gain trust from the customer. So that's how I would like to answer this question, Sunata.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Okay. Let's move on. So now let's assume that you are leading a cross-functional project team, which I'm sure you are, and there is a conflict which arises between members from different teams, or let's say different department altogether, and they have the conflicting priorities and the different perspective. So how do you facilitate this collaboration and resolve these conflicts to keep the project on track?
Hmm. The question is, how do you facilitate? So basically, the interviewer is probably trying to understand what is it that is probably a part of your natural flair, character, and experience. How will you, as an individual PM, will deal with it? To answer this question, Sunand, I would like to first of all probably not give a specific example. I would like to begin the answer by stating that conflict, any conflict, can happen due to multitude of reasons. But most commonly, which I have seen, is that a divergence of point of view, right? A divergence of point of view, that is one. The second thing is, how do we approach, each one of us approaches a situation in our own different way, and we feel that ours is the correct way. And then, of course, the question which you have asked is that we have conflicting priorities, right? So, when we have conflicting priorities, as long as it is not impacting the budget, the scope, the schedule, and the customer satisfaction, I'm good. However, if I see that it is impacting the business, it is impacting the delivery and the quality, my first thing is to basically go to the respective team leads and the functional departmental heads and call out that, hey, these are the priorities which your team members are calling out, but this is creating an impact, a not so positive impact on the project. So either you provide us with your priorities keeping the overall goal of the project intact, or let us adjust the priorities, I mean the project team, and then we kind of go on. But if the project is getting impacted, I think it is important for all of us to inform the stakeholders so that they can understand that they have to talk to their own functional team to rein in some of their thoughts around the priorities. So that's how I would like to approach this question.
Great. Thank you for that. Okay, let's move on. So now your project face delays due to factors outside your control, and that causing risks to the original timeline and the budget, which we have baseline in the beginning. So how do you renegotiate these deadlines and the resources with the stakeholders while maintaining their trust and confidence?
uh, Right. So it has happened for quite a few of my projects, right? Due to external dependencies. In fact, there was a huge program which I was leading, a data center rationalization, and the program was about running for about 2 years across three different regions: EMEA, APAC, and AMEA. Now, this kind of projects, they are heavily dependent on the procurement of the infrastructure and setting up the physical DC, right? So in such cases, we have to depend a lot on the vendor and the suppliers who are actually providing us with the hardware. Now, due to some issue, one of the DC, the supplier, was not on time to provide the installation. In such a case, it is extremely important for the PM again to keep all the stakeholders informed. That's one. The second thing is, just because there is an external dependency which is kind of not, which cannot be solved at that point in time, it doesn't mean the minimum operating rhythm of the project is going to get impacted. So there are other allied tasks, maybe not on the critical path. So the PM has to find out all those allied tasks and keep the minimum operating rhythm of the project go on. So for this particular program, for the DC, I ensured that the blueprint, both the high level design and the low level design, they were submitted, they were discussed, they were negotiated, and then the virtual discovery of the assets, they had to go on time. And then we have to find out the functional heads, whoever are owning these virtual assets, negotiate with them if there are any retirals. So all the allied activities, maybe not on the critical path, went ahead. At the same time, since I had kept my stakeholders informed, so they did not that did not come in as a root shock. But your question also has an element of question, often probably your expectation that how we should manage such a situation. I kind of reiterate and call out, as soon as the PM understands that the budget and the schedule is going to get impacted, do not delay in informing the stakeholders, and please follow a change request process, right? So a change request process we are often taking up because there is a either the scope or the schedule or the budget or the quality is getting impacted. That needs to be documented, the impact needs to be analyzed, and then we need to share the impact to the board. If they approve the CR, it's fine. And sometimes they also kind of they do not approve because it is at our end, it is our supplier, our vendor who has not been able to meet the commitment on the due time. So again, reach a consensus internally before going to the customer. If the consensus is that the leadership or the portfolio leadership, they say that fine, this much of schedule overrun, we are going to absorb the cost, then all good. We are going to go to the customer happy saying that we are absorbing this much of cost. But if the leadership is also saying that maybe we can negotiate a better way with the customer, raise the CR and help prevail and take into confidence the sponsor of the particular project, that we are doing whatever we can to expedite this kind of situation, but there is going to be a schedule and the cost overrun. The PM, I would say, they do not take a decision, they facilitate a decision such that the leadership at both the ends, they conquer what is the best way to move forward. So that's where, I would like to navigate the risk. Do not own the risk just because you are a PM. So that's my word of caution.
Great for that elaborated answer, Karabi. Thank you. Let's move on. So uh, now let's assume that you are a critical project which is going on, and the key stakeholders demand some additional features that were not included in the original scope. So how do you assess the impact of these changes on a project objective, and how are you going to negotiate with the stakeholders to manage the scope creep, more effectively, more efficiently? Yeah.
All right. So when there is an additional requirement, it means that it is definitely an added scope for us. Now it depends on the kind of project and what is the delivery methodology which we are adopting to address this particular situation. If it is a straightforward waterfall project, again, I say we go via the change request process. If it is impacting the budget and the schedule, we raise the CR, we obtain a buy in, and then we let the customer know that this is the schedule and the budget, additional budget which we are going to require. At times it may so happen, I have seen in my project, the risk reserve gets consumed. The risk reserve gets consumed because we are having an approval from both the kind of stakeholders, external and internal. That's how usually the waterfall projects are getting managed. uh, no to change, we are saying no to a change. It also happens in a waterfall kind of a project delivery methodology, because we see that that particular requirement is not adding any value to the product which we are probably developing and deploying, right? So the value mapping to that particular project also needs to be done as a part of the impact assessment. And if we are working in an agile methodology following the scrum practices, as we understand that saying no probably doesn't happen often, we are good to change. However, we cannot go ahead and incorporate the additional scope in any incoming or in progress sprints, or probably in the subsequent 2 or 3 sprints, whatever sprint backlog which we have designed. We probably understand the user stories, we elaborate it, we keep that as a part of the product backlog and keep that as a part of the sprint backlog, so that the in progress sprints and its goal remains unchanged. If the requirement is such critical that this needs to be incorporated ASAP in this particular sprint itself, then probably we adjust it by optimizing a user story of similar size, similar complexity, similar effort, and shifting it to the next or the subsequent sprint, and then incorporate this new change. Whatever be the case, I, as a PM, I'm not worried. How do we address this? I will be very, very particular that we follow the change request process. We document it so that it remains as an historical artifact for future reference.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you for that. Okay. Let's move on. So can you share your experience of managing distributed teams and how you address the communication challenges? So let's say you are managing a project with team members in different locations and the communication issues arise due to time zones and the cultural differences. So how do you ensure that everyone stay connected and aligned? So yeah, that's for you.
I think this is a common situation for all of us who are into this profession, right? So let's understand if we can find out the overlapping time zones, and we try to have the meetings, the sync up calls during these overlapping time zones as much as possible. Number two, we try to negotiate with the resource manager to provide us with the expertise from the same time zone as much as possible to minimize any disruption. Number three is we can turn on the caption wherever, if we are going for the virtual meetings, turn on the caption as well as the translation services of the tools that we are using for virtual conferencing, right? Aside that, um, I think I would like to recommend that before going in for such a meeting wherein we are having team members from across all the world, it is important to understand a bit, at least the geography, the region, the culture of the team members, so that small ice breaking talks in the initial part of the call, it helps. And turning on the camera, putting on a smile, maybe just calling out that, hey, I'm from India and I'm eastern part of India, and I usually pull up the map of the geography of India, and then help them understand I'm not from Bangalore, I'm not from Hyderabad, I'm from Kolkata. Have you been ever to Calcutta? Usually they say no. That helps a lot, ease up. So that's how I manage the situation.
Great. Thank you for that. Okay, let's move on. So can you share any example from your past project where you are managing, budget constraints toward the end of a project? So you have already working with some large projects, so maybe you can share, let's say, as a project near completion, you find that the budget is over allocated with, let's say, limited fund is left, right? So how do you prioritize the task and the allocated resources to stay within the budget? Because it happen a lot when we are just about to close the project. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, true.
by the time we reach is the the budget is already exhausted.
Exhausted. Yeah, true. However, Sunand, the kind of tools, the financial tools which we are using, probably in IBM, in Microsoft, in Blue Cocoon, in everywhere, in Accenture, probably in even in Wipro and all, it helps us to review the budgetary spend week on week, right? And we do not only review the spend, we are also forecasting the consumption pattern of the team members, right? So if this is a situation that the PM is coming to understand that there is a budget constraint, it's a kind of an outlier for me, right? Because then the week on week review of both the forecast and the consumption trend should have been good enough for me to understand that yes, we are going to consume about 70 or 80% of the budget and I will require additional fund. Having said that, I do not rule out the situation as well. It does happen. So in such a case, we'll have to understand what is the additional budget which we will require. So the expected time to complete the remaining work, the expected effort to complete the remaining work, that calculation is very critical, right? And the remaining work also needs to be assessed from a different perspective. How much value of the remaining work is very critical, and the task, if they are on critical path or not, right? So both in terms of its value and in terms of the number of tasks, we need to assess the impact. And also it is important for us to understand what is the amount of budget which we are going to require. Now every organization, every financial tool of the organization we know that if there is a deviation of, say, around 7 to 8% of the budget, if we require that, then usually it's okay for us. Going beyond 7 or 8%, it's a absolutely amber and a red flag. So in those cases, we have to talk internally to understand if we can use the risk reserve, because it is at the fag end of the project, maybe a bit of the management reserve, which obviously we do not want to touch. At the same time, whatever be the decision, I again reiterate, please let's raise a CR. Sometimes it may so happen that if the remaining tasks are not so critical and not so dependent on the particular person who has been working continuously since the day one of this project, we do a resource shuffling, you know, because the price of the resources or the rate of the resources which we are onboarding on a particular project, it varies from geography to geography. So similar skill set resource from a particular country A may have a rate which is a bit lower than what I have been continuing. So that kind of visibility, that kind of assessment and judgment also needs to be taken up as a part of the CR, and then we can put forward an amicable resolution.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Okay, let's move on. So there is a situation that one of your key vendor fails to deliver on time, and that cause a delay and concerns among different stakeholders. So how do you manage this vendor relationship, and you have to ensure that you have to minimize the impact on the project. So yeah, that's the one for you.
Again, I will say, let's understand the reason for the delay, right? So if the reason is kind of say there is a lockdown, say there is a stock out situation, and it's a global stock out situation not impacting my account only, but it is impacting globally across other accounts. So these are, kind of worldwide situation which we understand and the customer too understands. However, if there are any specific situation, say for example in the procurement tool, whenever we raise some kind of procurement or whenever we are trying to get in a particular vendor resource, that particular expertise itself is very difficult to find, right? So in those cases we have to go back to the architect and the technical leads to understand if we can use a different expertise uh, to work differently if we are talking about that particular resource. At the same time, keep all the stakeholders informed, and the vendor who is supposed to provide us with the resource or with the hardware, whatever it is, uh, we'll have to escalate. By escalation, it doesn't mean that we are complaining. By escalation, it means that we are asking the leadership so that they can have due attention on this particular situation. And trust me, Sunand, I'm very good in escalation. So yeah, it doesn't mean that we'll have to shout, we'll have to raise a red flag, we'll have to complain. No, escalation means we'll have to find our way across the jungle. We'll have to understand who's who can help us, and basically get the importance of this particular situation on their plate every day, unless they do something. So again, socializing and publicizing about the project plays a very big role here.
Absolutely, totally agree with you. See, it happened multiple times because their priorities are different and they have a lot of different things on their plate. So you have to, I mean, there is a saying that you have to cry, then only you will get a
Yeah.
milk. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, so now we comes to our last question for today. Okay, so some of your stakeholders uh, resist project changes. They are fearing that that will going to disrupt the existing processes. So how do you address these kinds of concerns and get them on board with the project? Because there are different kind of stakeholders, directly, indirectly, who's going to impact your project. So yeah,
So let's first understand why they are resisting change. Is it because that they do not have enough time to learn and adopt to a new set of tools and technologies, or uh, they feel that they will be replaced by this new tool or new technologies, or simply they don't care? So let's understand and let's get down to the bottom of it. uh, in fact, this has arisen, in one of my projects. So what I did was to basically create a team of the end users who are going to use this particular application. And then I say, I will use the term spotlight. So focus the spotlight on these kind of smaller teams, and you give them importance, saying that your feedback is going to make or break the application. It doesn't matter whether it is real or unreal. And the moment they are coming up with their feedback, publicize that internally within their organization, that, hey, we have received this feedback. You can create some kind of flyer, some kind of poster, some kind of email, so that the spotlight remains on those end users. This has uh, an impact on the psychology of the other end users who will also be interacting with that particular application, and they understand that being in the spotlight, providing a feedback, uh, getting visibility among the leadership, among the stakeholders, and being important, making them feel important, it helped to such an extent, Sunand, that the change management team for that particular project of mine did not have to do much work. So the spotlight and the amplification effect, it helps. I would strongly request my peers, my cohorts who are listening to this video, to kind of employ this particular thing. At the same time, we have to keep, again, it depends from project to project, we have to keep the global service help desk ready, so that if there are issues which are being reported by this closed group, or even by by a bigger group, it doesn't go through this ticket level or the ticket route, right? We raise a ticket, we wait for 7 or 8 hours, and then we see the ticket is getting resolved. No, the PM can usually create a war room, get the tickets resolved, and publicize, upvote that particular feedback given by the end user, so that they feel important, they are happy. It increases your overall CSAT score and NPS score, right? And that has a snowball effect, that your issues are getting resolved within a couple of hours. So why the heck should I resist the change? Sunan, if you are speaking,
Sorry.
you are
Yeah,
mute.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, wonderful. So if I have to summarize, because this is the last question. So first we have to understand their concerns. So we have to begin by listening to their concerns without judgment. I think that's important. Understanding their perspective, that will definitely going to help us to tailor our approach to address any specific worries, right? And then you mentioned about explain the need for the change, like why actually this change is happening, right? So if we clearly articulate why the change is necessary, we can highlight any problems or into the current processes, and how this particular change is going to resolve those issues, right? So highlight the benefits, as you mentioned, is again very important. Potential benefit of the change, such as increase the efficiency or the cost saving or the improve quality, or it can be anything, right? So if we can tell them about all these things, I think that's definitely going to help. And also, like, if we engage these stakeholders early into the process, so that will definitely going to help them. So if they can participate in our planning, or let's say any decision making processes, that can give a sense of ownership and involvement, so that will reduce the resistance. So that's for sure. And of course we have to gather the feedback, as you mentioned, regularly. We can make few changes based on their
Right.
proposed, so all those things. So I think with this, we will going to create a relationship with them, a
Yeah,
trust, right?
yeah,
And an open dialogue. And we can address a lot of misconceptions which people heard from here and there, misinformation about the changes and their impact, because half of the things are not right, not true,
their
right?
assumptions.
There are assumptions, and that's what I think that's happened whenever is any changes is there. So of course all these things are there. Then proof of concept, so we can do some
Yeah,
pilot programs, and we can come up with some success stories. I think
yeah,
that is definitely
yeah,
going
it's
to
very important.
help us. And of course we should provide them the rights of training, the resources, the support system. And yeah, in the last, we have to monitor some feedback loop should be there. So I think all these things should combine together. In the last, we should also celebrate the milestones. Sometimes we forget to do that.
Absolutely.
We should recognize the achievements, we should celebrate the milestones, all the success stories, all these positive changes, right? So all these things, I think, yeah, we can do. Okay, I just thought to add, otherwise I
No,
just
your
want to
answer
sum up.
was much better than mine, to be honest.
No, no, no. Okay, so thank you, Karabi, for being with us and sharing your knowledge. And of course, we will have many more sessions with you in future for sure. And friends, I hope you've learned a lot of things today. So if yes, Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and stay tuned for more. So until next time, take care, bye, and thank you, Karabi, one more time.
Thank you so very much, Sunand, for having me here. And it's a pleasure not only to be here on this career talk, but to be connected with you. And I do really mean it. Thank you so much, Sunand.
Thank you.
Bye.